Don't be afraid to sit in that room and speak up and have a voice. We now have access to data that enables you to curate the luxury experience.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode from the Leadership Blueprint podcast. I'm really excited today to be joined by Peppy Dosanjh. He brings with over 20 years experience in the human resources industry, specifically working across over 75 jurisdictions in multiple countries. As a really passionate HR leader, he's worked on multiple mergers and acquisitions, leadership transformation programs. He's also been based in the Middle East region now for over 10 years. Previous to his current consulting positions, he was Vice President of HR for the Marriott Group based here in the region, focusing on talent efforts across the EMEA region. What's really interesting today for Peppy coming on the Leadership Blueprint is not only his perspective from a HR perspective, but also as a change management neuro-linguistic program expert, as well as holding a master's in psychology and also being a fellowship CIPD holder, as well as a Six Sigma practitioner. I think his insights today are going to be really interesting to us to see from how does HR support that leadership transformation and talent development. So first off, Peppy, thank you so much for joining us today. Really great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Ollie. Really appreciate your invitation.
No, thank you very much. And, I just want to start off by firstly asking you what does kind of leadership and transformation mean to yourself? And then also tying that into a question around, just giving us a bit of an overview on your journey to date, within HR, how have you kind of gone through that diversity of industries and especially across the different jurisdictions? I think it's a really interesting journey and story. So it'd be great to get your overview and then sort of seeing how the transformation leadership journey has kind of changed over time within those jurisdictions and industries. So over to you, and thank you once again for joining us.
Thanks, Ollie, and it's a real pleasure being here talking to you today. My career started in probably 2002 after I graduated university, but even before then, I was dabbling in recruiting and headhunting. I was working through university holidays for a headhunting agency, doing IT and telco recruitment. So that's really where I started my journey and my career. I then had my own headhunting company from 2005 to 2011 in the UK. We were really successful in working with Ministry of Defence, National Health Service, clients like Sony Entertainment, Wolseley, some great PLC kind of high-hitting FTSE 100 businesses, as well as some public sector clients. We work with some great universities as well, and some of the clients that I work with are still very close friends of mine, even today, and they're people that I work with, that I talk to, that I rely on for advice as kind of my own personal boardroom, I guess, when I'm floating ideas and I'm trying to get advice on different things that I'm doing. I then moved from the UK because I wanted something different. I wanted to try something different. I wanted to expand my horizons. I come from a second-generation immigrant family into the UK, and I think once you've been an immigrant family and once you've been involved in that sort of environment, the passion for that kind of moving country and seeing new things, I don't think that disappears and it doesn't go away. And so I had the option to go to Singapore or Dubai. With my old contacts in recruiting and headhunting. I chose Dubai. I ended up working at Dubai Silicon Oasis out of the Pineapple Building, for all of you that know where that is on the 311. But I worked for a company called Rethink Recruitment and a really fantastic guy called Gavin Smith. I led a team of IT and telco recruiters, and I was placing IT and telecoms folks into some fantastic places around the region: Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Libya, into parts of Abu Dhabi, into Saudi Arabia. Generally, before banks go into some of these countries, the telco infrastructure needs to go in first so that the SWIFT payment system can all be set up. So our job was to find people who had done this type of work before, drop them into country, into places like Afghanistan, Libya, after challenging times that happen in those sorts of places. They would then help with the infrastructure, the IT infrastructure, and then banking and all that sort of stuff would go in. So I had a great time doing that, and I I hit a bit of a glass ceiling when it came to the headhunting world. I got to a point in my career where I always knew what was coming next. I always knew what was going to happen next for me in my career. And I got to that point and I couldn't quite figure out where I wanted to go. And I saw a lot of my colleagues going into in-house recruiting, and moving into kind of heads of TA roles in-house and this sort of thing. So one day I saw a job advertised for Qatar Airways. It was a recruitment leader role working out of Doha. So I applied for the job, and because I was a recruiter, I had the head of recruiting's telephone number in my mobile. So I applied for the job. I waited a few days. I didn't hear anything back. I'm impatient by nature. And so I picked up the phone and phoned Brian Fuge, his name was back then, and just said, look, I've applied for a job. I've not heard anything from you. I've spoken to you before. And bless him, he was very, very kind to me at that point. It would have been very easy for him to hang up the phone and, say, look, apply online and, do the normal do. But he said, give me your name. He looked me up on the system. He said, your CV looks really good. Let me get someone to phone you back. And within 30 minutes, I had a phone call back. Within 3 days, I was flown out to Doha to have an interview with the technical team. And then I led technical recruiting for Qatar Airways through a period of immense growth. We went from 1,500 people in the technical department. The technical department is people who are fixing the plane, buying the plane, running the plane, the kind of air traffic organization, that kind of engineering infrastructure in Qatar Airways. We went from 1,500 people to 3,000 people in that department in the space of 2 years. I then led pilot recruiting. In addition to that, we went from hiring kind of 1 or 2 pilots a month to 80 pilots a month, through some insane growth. And if you think a pilot, right, we were onboarding around 2.5 aircraft a month into Qatar Airways at that point. You think A380s, 777s, A350s coming in towards the end of my time there. And so you're hiring all of these pilots from all over the world. So my team and I were traveling all over the world. We created new employer brand, employer marketing. We found through that time that pilots were happy to come over, captains, first officers were happy to come over to Doha, but the wives and families weren't. There was a misconception about the environment that there was in Doha, that you don't get the freedoms, you have to cover up, you can't drink, you've got no bars, restaurants, hotels, etc., which was totally untrue. And so we put together some really cool advertising material, some employee value proposition material about what it meant to work at Qatar Airways. We got our employer brand out there about the 5-star airline and the luxury aspect of what we were doing in Doha, and we managed to increase the number of pilots and the number of engineers and everyone else that was coming into Doha. And then after a couple of years there, I had the urge to come back to Dubai. I enjoyed Doha. I made some amazing friends out there, many of whom I'm still in touch with today. But I felt the need to come back to Dubai, and I did a short contract with Interserve PLC. I worked on what is now King Abdullah Financial District in Riyadh, and the media zone. I can't remember the name of the media zone, but this big gold square building in Riyadh. This was back in 2016. And back then, all of this infrastructure was being built in Riyadh, and it was all being mothballed. So King Abdullah Financial District was about 80 buildings that had all been built in 2016. The palm trees had been put in, the wadis had been put in through all of this financial district, but then it had been left there. And it got left there. And it got left there until just a couple of years ago when, Mohammed bin Salman came in, MBS came in, and all of this kind of infrastructure in Saudi started to be activated. And my belief is they managed to activate so quickly because they planned this all the way through. This had been planned for a long time, and suddenly they could go big and go quick and go big, really, really, really fast. So I did a short-term contract there whilst they were waiting for a head of HR to onboard, and that was my first foray into kind of generalist HR. And then I moved into Pearson Education, so the guys that run Financial Times and Penguin Books, EdXL, and all that sort of stuff for the region. I did a year there, and through restructure and changes, I left there after a year along with a couple of other people, and then I moved into Marriott. And all of my jobs up to that point, and including the one at Marriott, and actually including the contracts that I'm doing at the moment, have always been through people that I know. I'm naturally inquisitive. I talk to everyone. I'll always, find a common ground with people. And my job in Marriott was brought to me by my former VP of HR in Qatar Airways, and he said to me, look, there's a job going at the JW Marriott Marquis. It's head of HR job for a hotel, but it's not just any hotel. It's the biggest hotel outside of the US. It's a 1,600 room hotel, 72 stories, twin towers, 1,650 people working there, plus buyout. It's a mega machine, right? I mean, it's what an incredible experience to work for such an amazing hotel as a head of HR. And one of the things that we did there, if you talk about business transformation and talent strategies that you're alluding to from a HR perspective, we did a lot of internal development there. That place became the machine to provide staff to other Marriott hotels in the region. When I was there, we had 28 hotels in the UAE. When I left Marriott, we had 65 hotels in the UAE.
Wow.
When I got to JW Marquis in 2016, there were 550 hotels listed on TripAdvisor. Now there's over 1,000 hotels listed on TripAdvisor in Dubai alone. And so the growth has been incredible.
Yeah.
And what I love about the industry and what I love about the hotels that I go to, and you and I have frequented those hotels together, right? There's always someone who has come through the JW Marquis in my time there, who is also now in another hotel. And so there's always someone who who you've helped, who you've supported, who came to talk to you about something through that kind of machine of people. And that talent strategy really supported and helped the growth of the organization. So from there, I went into a leadership role leading HR for all of the hotels in the UAE. So all 65 hotels, a workforce of about 18,000 people. And really, we delivered excellence, right? I can't take anything away from the teams, the general managers, the leadership teams that we have in some of these amazing hotels like the St. Regis, the Bulgari, the JW Marriott, the Ritz-Carlton, the Luxury Collection, Grosvenor House. So some amazing, incredible hotels run by some amazing, incredible people that are just a joy to go to. And it's ruined my experience for the rest of the hotels that I visit in other places in the world, because nowhere does hospitality like Dubai. I mean, everybody travels here, everybody comes here for hospitality, everyone comes here for F&B. There's Forbes listings, there's Michelin-starred restaurants, you name it, right? I mean, Dubai is on the map for all of this, and it's the biggest industry probably now in Dubai. I know in the UAE it's probably still oil, but certainly in Dubai, the diversification away from that kind of petrodollar into hospitality has been amazing. And then because of my work within talent and because of the talent development focus and developing talent as a whole, I moved into a vice president of talent role across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So that covered 76 countries, over 1,000 business units, so that was over 1,000 hotels across from Northern Ireland across to Saudi Arabia, north up into the Nordics, and down into South Africa, Cape Town. And that change, one of our biggest successes in that was that our hotel leaders, by the time I left that job, 3 out of every 4 of our hotel leaders were grown internally. Over half of all of our managers across the entire estate were grown internally. So 1 in every 2 managers. And that really drives a culture, right? I mean, you're talking about business transformation and culture and talent strategies. Because we were growing people internally, because we were giving people the opportunity to grow internally, we were giving people access to that opportunity and that growth, and we were investing in those individuals. That grows a culture because they multiply. talent multiplies other talent, right? You take care of someone, they're going to take care of 10 people, and so you can see that through the organization. I was very sad to leave Marriott. I was very sad to leave my job at that point. There was a desire to shift a lot of things back to Europe and the UK, and so I decided to join Accor and the Fairmont organization. And again, that came through one of my contacts through friends and people I'd spoken to, and they wanted a similar sort of approach to what I'd worked on at Marriott. They wanted that kind of talent strategy, the internal mobility across a Fairmont organization. They have 90 hotels across the world, some amazing, iconic properties, the Savoy in London, Fairmont Monte Carlo, Fairmont Whistler, Fairmont Banff. I mean, there's the Plaza in New York. The list goes on, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I started to work with Raffles as well, which is part of the Accor group. And again, some amazing properties there. Raffles started in Singapore. They've still got an amazing property in Singapore. And this kind of high-end luxury environment that we're working with. And again, that kind of internal growth, making sure that we've identified internal talent, we've got succession plans in place, and it drives that culture. It's organically driven culture, right? It's not just talking about it, it's doing it. It's not, it's walking the walk rather than talking the talk.
No, absolutely. I think something you've touched on there throughout, which is super interesting, and I think is a definite thing I'd like to go a bit deeper on, is how have you managed to put together talent across different brands that have different levels of luxury? So you've mentioned there different standards of hotels that cater to different parts of the market in different countries. But you've said a large number of leaders were being developed from within. How did you manage to bridge that gap? Because obviously someone in a different country may struggle to move internationally, someone from a particular, maybe a more budget brand to a very high luxury brand, but you were able to bridge some of those gaps. Was there specific programs or frameworks that you were putting in place? And it'd be really interesting to dive a bit deeper into some of those for sure.
Yeah, I had a really great partner in Vice President for Learning and Development, a lady called Josephine Lianu at Marriott, who put together some amazing programs for general managers, for leadership teams in hotels, for managers that are coming through. And the managers and the leadership team were being put through luxury university. They were being put through luxury talent-based programs so that they could go into different environments. A lot of it came to exposure as well. If you were in the UAE market, for example, and you had 65 hotels, we could take someone from a Sheraton and shift them into a JW or shift them into a Ritz-Carlton in maybe a parallel role, or maybe even a position below where they were within their current brand, to help them to get an understanding of what luxury is and what it means to be in a luxury environment. The challenge in all of this is luxury's changed, right? We talk about change in our world and the speed of change and the way that the environment changes so quickly. Luxury's changed as well. Luxury used to be a very stiff, a clean shaven, tie on, and someone stood at the door and welcoming you, and very programmatic. Luxury, you'd get left the same kind of amenity and this sort of thing. But luxury has gone to a hyper personalization stage where it's all about knowing your customer, right? It's all about knowing the needs and wants of what that individual requires, what their family needs, and that's what luxury is. It isn't necessarily about the furnishings anymore. In my view, it's about the experience that you create in the environment that someone walks into, that creates a luxury experience, right? It's you'll remember this. It's like an episode of Cheers, isn't it, where the song is where everybody knows your name. And luxury is, in my view, it's kind of moving into that way. It's when you walk into a building, someone says, "Hey, welcome back. It's really nice to see you again. It was really nice having you here before. Where have you been? How are the children? And they start to, the teams interact with a guest at a different level, rather than the programmatic way of doing things in the past would be, "Oh, how was your flight, sir? How is your travel here?" And you'd be sat there going, "Well, actually, I live in Dubai, so I haven't been on a flight." And so you'd get that same kind of rhetoric coming out, but we now have access to data that enables you to curate the luxury experience. And one of my other friends at Marriott, who looked at kind of the loyalty program and deep data and that sort of thing. I remember talking to him multiple times saying, you've got all of these members across the Marriott Bonvoy program. You must know when someone wants to have a burger, when someone wants to go for dinner, what steak they're going to have, whether they're going to have it medium or rare. You must already know this. And I remember him saying, yes, we do, but we don't have access to the data yet. Like it's in the system somewhere, but trying to extract that data out and then trying to hyper-personalize. This is all the stuff that's coming, right? This is all the things that artificial intelligence or assisted intelligence is going to help us to kind of curate that experience for individual guests. But it comes down to the training aspect and changing with the times as well. I'll give you another example. I traveled to hospitality schools in Switzerland. And I remember going pre-COVID up into the mountains in Switzerland, and the hospitality school, I won't name who it was, but they were still doing silver service training. And everybody was in a shirt and tie, everyone was clean shaven, and they were very programmatic in their responses. And I sat there and said, why are you training people like this? Our brands don't want this anymore. Our brands want something different. They want to see the personality of the person. A guest walks in, they want to see the personality of that individual, right? They want to hear about their lived experiences. They want to hear about where they've come from. They want to learn about the environment from the local within that environment. And so you've got to give people the ability to speak about it. And so the hotel schools started to change on that basis. They're now more interactive. They're more engaging. They're less stiff and stiff-lipped in the way that they come across. So that the world changes, right? But it changes so quickly that sometimes it takes us a little bit of time to catch up at the other end.
No, 100%. And I think that's the data point together with the speed of change are two very, very key points. And it's very interesting to see when someone in HR is able to tap into that data-driven side, to link that to talent, to link that to an experience. And ultimately, I think that's a really key thing that really separates, I think, businesses where HR is actually part of the business as opposed to just something that is assisting business activity. And I think they're two very, very different points. So in terms of, if you were to look at then that building of the culture, nurturing of individuals, especially individuals coming in from acquisitions. We mentioned earlier you've been part of acquisitions. How did you see there was a particular way that you would assess people coming in from an acquisition to how do we get them embedded into this culture quicker? Or was it just, our system is so robust, we will just rotate them through hotels faster or whatever it might be? Was there something you would do different for integrating people from a merger? I think that's something I always am really interested to hear about, because we normally see within the first, I think it's 18 months or so, generally a very high percentage of people that were part of the merger have moved on because they weren't integrated, they weren't understood, they weren't listened to. So I think that'd be a super interesting thing to see. How did you integrate and then continue that nurturing for those individuals?
Yeah, I've been through a few kind of takeovers and acquisitions in my time in the UAE. One recently was the Blue Waters conversion of Caesar's Palace to Banyan Tree. I worked on Yas Island, converting from Viceroy into W and a few others as well. And I think the common factor in all of this and the way that I view it is honesty. I don't think you can hide anything from people when you come into these sorts of environments. When you end up taking over a business or taking over a business unit or changing a brand of something, there's a reason why someone's been brought in to do that, right? There could be a performance reason, there could be a leadership reason, there could be all sorts of different kind of conundrums and equations that are going on in the background to lead to that event. And I think when you go into these organizations, honesty is the best policy. I think explaining to people that we're going to try our best to take care of people, We're going to assess everyone. We're going to be looking at compensation and benefits. We're going to be looking at contracts. We're going to be looking at structures. We're going to be doing all of this stuff. We're going to be doing it over this period of time. And then over this period of time, we're going to come back to you and let you know what's going on. For those of you that want to stay with our organization, we can help you to find other positions that may not be within this business unit. But if you want to stay doing what you're doing, then maybe we can find you somewhere else, because within Accor, within Marriott, within Qatar Airways, within these large organizations, there's always 25%, 30% labor turnover. So if you've got an organization like Qatar Airways that probably now employs 50,000 people, you know, they're going to be losing 12,500 to 15,000 people a year that they're going to need to replace. So there's always going to be an opportunity. There's always going to be an opportunity in the UAE when you've got, you know, over 1,000 hotels, and I don't even know how many hundreds of thousands of people working within hospitality who are leaving and turning around. So I think when it comes to these conversations, honesty is always the best policy. And I think clarity, I think constant updates with the teams to let them know where we are, let them know what challenges we might face, let them know that if there's slippage in our timelines and that sort of thing is super important. I think the bit where people fail, I've seen them done great. I've seen them be done not so great. The not so great ones are where people are clouded in their communication, where they are not honest. You can see they're not honest, and there's things going on in the background. There's always things that you can't say at a certain point in time, but I think there's a lot that you can say that leaders often or sometimes leaders are not afraid of having difficult conversations, but it's the last thing someone wants to do, right? So the last thing someone wants to do is to say, you know what, your job's going to be at risk, or you know what, we are going to restructure. But if you tell people ahead of time and you tell people in enough time, then you're being a better person to those individuals than if you hold on to the information and do it at the last minute. I remember closing down one of the most, the original flagship in the UAE. We closed down JW Marriott in Deira, and there were 350 people at that hotel. We found 345 of them jobs. Right. Because, and 5 of them, you know, 5 or 10 of them, I think it was at the time, they wanted to go home. They wanted to take their gratuity after 25, 30 years and go and start their own business or spend time with their family or whatever it was. But the majority of them, we found them other employment, and that was through working with them and working together, but also having your teams around you, right? Having all of the other business units, making sure that they're collective and together, and everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet. And I remember when the Starwood Marriott merger and acquisition happened between 2 organizations, I was a buddy I was at the JW Marriott Marquis then, and I was a buddy to Marian Al-Balki, who was the head of HR over at Habital City, which was a Westin, a St. Regis, and a W hotel at the time. And because we were buddies, I'd talk to her every day, right? I'd say, you know, is there any help that you need? Is there anything that you need? Any support? Any guidance? You've got new policies, new processes, new procedures. You've got new things coming in. And I think having that kind of interaction through those transitions and mergers and being there for people is super important. And we're good friends today, right? After all those years.
I think the thing you've indirectly spoken about a number of times there, but the word you've never used, but I'm just going to say it for you, is transparency. I think that's everything you've said there is just leading to, if you're transparent with people, everything else becomes a byproduct, because they understand where do they sit. They understand that you have got their interests at heart, and therefore you are working together. And I mean, that's just a great sort of piece of advice you've given us there for sure. The bit you touched on is there are sometimes difficult conversations to have. There are sometimes leaders that struggle to have those conversations. Are there bits of advice or takeaways that you could give for leaders having to address some of those conversations? Is that something where, is it simply, look, follow a basic guideline and just practice? Is there, look, make sure you're sticking your hand up and getting some additional trainings in certain areas? How have you guys as through your career assisted the leadership team to not only to basically unlock that vision and have those conversations. Are there any particular frameworks you've put in place on that?
I think when it comes to those difficult conversations, I think everybody has challenges with them, right? Everybody gets sweaty palms, and if you didn't get sweaty palms, you'd be a bit of a narcissist, and you're probably not the right person in the job in the first place. But I think you look at for me, what I've always done with my teams and my leaders is enable them to make mistakes, right? Create the safety net, create that psychological safety. A lady called Amy Edmondson created that term from Harvard, I think, when it comes to psychological safety. That was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. But creating that safety net for people to fail and be there to pick them up rather than beat them up is really, really important. So when it comes to those difficult conversations, I think organizations do themselves a disservice because they don't support leaders in how to have those difficult conversations. Not everyone knows how to do it. Not everyone enjoys doing it. Not everyone has a training to do it, and not everyone has the empathy to be able to do it. And I think helping people to understand, to role play those situations, to have someone who is supportive with you to be able to pick up those conversations is really, really important. Just over the past few weeks, I've had very challenging conversations with some key stakeholders over a few situations, and both myself and a senior colleague are kind of sat in the room, and the ability to pick up with each other, right? If that person kind of lacks and fails or doesn't close the loop on a certain topic, to be able to jump in and pick that up, or to be able to do it the other way around is really, really important. So having the support, I think, is really important. Creating a psychological safety net is really important. But critically, it's the training aspect of how to have those conversations. And I'll tell you why that's really critical, right? Through COVID, all of our businesses lost a lot of people. Businesses were shut down, people moved home. And then, especially in the Middle Eastern markets, we've had a massive influx of business, right? In fact, I take that back. Across Europe, across the UK, across America, we had a bounce in everything after COVID. So businesses were booming. What did that mean? That meant that we had people going into management positions who hadn't been managers before, right? They hadn't had the training before. They hadn't had the experience before. And we also had people who were training these people, trying to train a big mass of people, and this kind of conundrum comes together, right? And it creates a lack of training when it comes to the ability to performance manage an individual, the ability to help people to develop in their career, have those difficult career conversations that you might need to have, look at those succession plans, competency mapping, and all that sort of stuff. But the training aspect of it is so critical, more so now than ever before, because we've got people that need that training, that haven't had that training before. You'll have heard of the Peter Principle as well, right? People promoted to their level of incompetence. And you've not heard that before.
No, I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah.
But and I say it from a kind place rather than a bad place, right? You get people who are so good at their jobs that they get promoted. You imagine, take a football team and you've got the best striker in the world. They're not going to become the best manager. You don't see that happen, right? They're not going to become the best captain more often than not. Sometimes they will. Sometimes you get special people who can fulfill that role. But for the most part, they don't. And so people get promoted to that level, but then we don't give them the support. And so often I've had conversations with leaders and our leadership teams in different roles that I've been within to say, it's our fault, right? That person's being disciplined today because they've messed something up, but it's our fault. What support did we give to them? How did we performance manage them? How did we give them feedback? Did we do an emotional intelligence assessment? Did we have a look at their ability and personality assessments? Did we help them with their competencies? Did we assess them correctly? Did we give them a development plan? And if we didn't, it's our fault. It's not their fault. The guy's got 10 performance ratings of outstanding over the last 10 years, and today you're here to fire him. Like, That's not that's not the way to do it.
Yeah, and it's a really valid point, and it's something we do see a lot where, and you're absolutely right, someone is exceptional in the role they're currently doing, but that might be because their passion, their skill set, their desire is within whatever the current role needs. But does that translate into the next level up? Because the next level up, to be a good leader, a good manager, your role does change. And I think that's something which it's a really good point raised, that not enough businesses kind of identify the difference between the two. It's not always a case of, have you done the role beneath to be able to do the role above? But what are the skills needed for the role above? And can you do those? Can we train you in them? Or do we need to look elsewhere? And that kind of takes me very much into part of the next question around skill shortage. So you mentioned obviously post-COVID, the bounce, filling in gaps, people having to step up that maybe weren't ready. How did you start trying to readdress some of that imbalance? Now, it's obviously going to go back to, I'm sure, part of the moving people around, putting them through assessments and training, but in such a hyper condensed time, were there things you guys had to do different? Was there things that you had to change? How did you adjust to that in such a short space of time? Because you had a great framework, but now you had to do it over a highly condensed period of time to get people back to where they should be.
Yeah, if I look at that in my time with Marriott, through COVID, I was in charge of HR for a region, and I had exited a lot of people from hotels. We closed a lot of hotels down temporarily, and then coming out of COVID, I'd been put in charge of hiring people and doing the talent job across Europe, Middle East, and Africa, which was, it was incredible because of the volume that we were hiring. I think back to the stats now, I think in the biggest year after COVID across the continent, we filled 44,000 jobs.
What time frame?
In a year.
Yeah, wow.
In a year. So I think the best months were about 4,500 jobs a month. And it was so different per market. In the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, coming up to the World Cup, it was open the doors, go to India, go to Nepal, go to Asia, go to Eastern Europe, go to parts of Europe, interview as many people as you can and get them here, right? So logistically fly them here, because you can get a visa, you can get medical insurance, we've got housing, everything's taken care of in this part of the world. So in a lot of ways, it was easier to get people here, but then it was more difficult to train all that big number of people when they got here. In parts of Europe, I'll take London as an example. We had restaurants and bars and parts of hotels and floors of hotels that were closed because we couldn't find people to get there because of Brexit, because of the European legislation and all this sort of stuff that was going on. It was really, really difficult to get people into London to work these types of jobs in hotels. And so I remember my team running recruiting events, and we were, if you could speak well and you were presented well, we could find you a job at that point. We would train you, right? And again, I come back to Josephine and her team in learning and development and the training programs and all this sort of stuff that was put together at that point. It was intense. But because we were hiring so many people in those sorts of markets, we were losing so many people in those sorts of markets as well. Because people would come into hospitality, they'd see the glamour of what it meant to work in hospitality, but then they'd come into the environment and it was so busy and it was so intense that we were losing people as quickly as we were hiring them. And so then we had to put in strategy to make sure that we retained people and we looked after people and we helped them. We were going through stages of inflation and prices were going up and things were happening that meant that salaries had to be increased or hours had to be reduced or people were allowed to do gig work and this sort of stuff so that they could meet their monthly income. But it was, in answer to your question, it was different strategies for different markets. We didn't have the people to be able to turn around, move from one market to another and that sort of thing. It was every market was hiring, every market was open. I think the places where we found it more straightforward to hire was in this part of the world. The places where it was more challenging was in Europe and the UK. But then it was about training and development and really focusing on service levels at that point.
And so, I mean, that in itself, fascinating. I think, especially in terms of just trying to keep up. Even though during all that period of time, I've known you, and I'd never even quite appreciated the level of pace that was going on behind the scenes. Even when we catch up, it was something I hadn't quite appreciated. So, super interesting to hear some of this stuff, I must say. If you were to look back then, especially now going into the journey you're doing at the minute, more on the sort of consulting side, what are some of the key lessons you've taken away today when you're going into some of these meetings, when you're going into sort of very different conversations now? What would you say are your 1, 2, 3 biggest learnings that you would take away from sort of career to date that have helped shape your HR journey so far?
I think one of my biggest takeaways from my leadership journey in HR is don't be afraid to have the conversation. Don't be afraid to sit in that room and speak up and have a voice, irrelevant of who's sat in the room, irrelevant of, the CEO might be sat there or the president might be sat there. If there's something to say it, because it may be meaningful. It may be meaningful to them. It's definitely meaningful to you, and it's important for you to get your point across and to articulate it in the absolute right way. So I think my number one thing is, if you've got something to say it. However, before you say it, get your alliances before you go into the room. Right. So make sure that you've got people around you who are supportive towards your message. So get people aligned before you go into the meeting. Make sure that you've trialed and tested what you're talking about with those people to make sure that you don't seem like your ideas aren't thought through within that environment, and especially when they're new things, right? I mean, no one went through COVID before. No one will hopefully go through it again. No one went through trying to open 65 hotels in the space of a week. No one went through trying to close 65 hotels in the space of a week, right? That just didn't happen. The first hotel to go into lockdown was one of my hotels in the UAE, right? I mean, it was intense. It was intense.
I think the message you've got there is the whole, you need to make sure that having your alliances shows that you are representing people, as opposed to it's my opinion. I might be the person that is delivering that message, but this is the message of the wider team. This is something that is important to everybody. I think it again goes back to, I think, why you and I get on. I think why you've been successful is the empathy piece, is the listening, is the understanding, is that transparency piece, so that people will share that information with you.
I think the inquisitiveness, the inquisitiveness of it all as well, right? One of my biggest strengths is being inquisitive, and so when we first started talking about doing this podcast, we were talking about the different industries and the different environments. And I look at myself as being industry agnostic, and the number of times you see people trying to hire people from within their industry. It's so easy to learn an industry, right? I mean, whether you're working in an airline, a hotel, in technology, in facilities management, in education, in wherever, HR is about taking care of people. It's about investing in people. It's about making sure that they have the right tools and resources at their hands to be able to do great work. It's about helping them to grow as individuals and making sure that they have a career. And it's about making sure that they've got opportunity, right, to make sure that they can grow those careers. And if I look at some of the great organizations that I've worked for, they're growing so quickly because they can create opportunity for their people. And so it's self-perpetuating, right? They grow at this end. They're saying to their people, look at all this great stuff that we're going to get for you. You need to grow, and these are things that you need to do, and then you're going to be able to get there. The number of times I used to talk about growth of the number of hotels, we're going to open 400 hotels. That means 400 this, that means 800 this, that means 1,000 of these positions coming up, and they're all for you if you do the right thing, right? If you're developing, if you're growing, if you're mobile, if you're going to get involved in different projects and different aspects of work, the growth is there. You can see it.
Absolutely. And we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, so this might form part of your answer. I'm not sure. Let's see. Where do you see the most significant change coming for HR in the coming years? And part of that is your opinion of this, but part of that as well is this is what I would say future HR leaders need to be listening to and thinking about to support businesses to grow. So it's kind of both of those together. What would you say those are?
I think there's such a split at the moment in terms of what it means to create great employee experience. And I think employee experience is going to be something that is going to be on the boardroom table. If it's not already, it should be, right? And I liken it to customer experience. If as a customer, you can go onto Amazon today and click one button and have a parcel delivered to your house on the same day, why is it that when you apply for a job, you have to go through 20 different steps to be able to get the application through the applicant tracking system and then have 4 interviews and maybe get a response and maybe you don't? Or why is it that when you go through a performance management system, you're having to do double secure authentication to get into the system and then upload your goals and then send them to your manager for approval and then get feedback and then go back and forth and do that kind of click, double click, backward and forward kind of experience? And why is it that when you're looking for a new opportunity within your organization, that those opportunities aren't fed to you? When we've got data about what great leaders look like, what environment they've come from, what background they've come from, what success they've had on their balanced scorecard, what KPIs they've achieved, how they've got to where they are, how is it that we can't work that data back to our lowest level employees and say, hey, look, if you hit these KPIs, statistically, you're going to get to these kinds of positions? And we turn around and say, because you're hitting these KPIs and because your behaviors are like this, because your competencies are rated like this, because you're hitting these goals, these types of people that hit these goals and behave in this sort of way end up in these jobs. So here's 5 jobs that are available at the moment that you could be suitable for, right? We're doing this on the customer side consistently through artificial intelligence now, assisted intelligence, whatever you want to call it, right? Your algorithms for Facebook know what you're going to buy before you buy it. And it's not because they're listening to you, contrary to what people say. It's because the algorithm predicts what you're going to do before you know that you're going to do it. It knows that, if you put it into psychology terms, it knows which action potential in your head is going to fire against the next one before you know it's going to happen. It knows you're going to nod your head before you nod your head. It's that, and it's predictable. And so when you start to think about employee experience in that way, it's predictable. You can predict what's going to happen. So I think one of the advancements in HR is going to be the ability to predict and help people to go through their career journey with an organization and create that employee experience that is absolutely for them and that individual and curated to that person, because everyone is different and everyone's individual and they've come from different backgrounds and different environments. Some people come from a collectivist culture, some people come from an individualistic culture, and people are all different, but curating that experience for those people is going to be really, really important. I think when it comes to, there's probably 4 or 5 different things, right? Leadership development is going to be really important. The culture that's created in organizations is going to be really important. The tech that enables all of that is going to be really important. How people manage change in organizations is going to be really important. And then the way that people move through an organization is going to be really important. And that's for all of these things add up to trust, right? It's the employee trusting the organization that they're going to get looked after if they do the right thing and it's predictable through the organization. People talk about there not being a job for life anymore. And I think there's an element of truth to that, but I think it's also challenged by the organization. The reason there's not a job for life, in my view, is because the organization hasn't changed to enable the way that a job for life has changed, right? People have changed over the last 40, 50 years. They're not working in coal mines anymore. They're not working on factory production lines in the same way. The world has changed, right? So the workforce has changed in the way that they approach work. Organizations also need to change the way that they approach people and create the experience around them, and not use the same old performance management, leadership assessment tools that have always been used in the past. That's what I think. I don't know whether I'm right or not, but that's my view.
I think, as with all this stuff, time will tell. I think, as with all of this stuff, what's key is still going back to that everything is changing, and what we even think will be 6 months, a year down the line will be probably slightly different anyway. So some of what you said, I'm sure, will come to fruition. I'm sure some of what you said will be step one of, it'll end up being version 2.0, so on and so forth, as more and more things change. And I think that's the businesses that are able to keep that pace of change going are key. And I think the bit that you've alluded to there, which businesses that are doing this well now and will continue this well, are the ones that get the balance between the people side and the data side. And I think the danger I always see from a recruitment standpoint is when a business believes that data will save all their problems, data will create as many problems if you don't use it in the right way. If you do, and you amalgamate people and data together, then it's a very interesting growth. And I think that's where your strength lies, in that you see the two of those meeting in the middle. I mean, the message to the rest is I don't always see as many people see that the two come together. They see them as separates. And I think the people I feel that kind of bring them together, they are gonna push things forward further. But look, from my side, I could talk to you for all day, but
I'm sure all of your listeners will get bored of that anyway. But
yeah, so there's a point where we better quit while we're ahead. But look, on a serious note, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think there's some really key points addressed here. I think it's definitely one of those we should definitely circle back in 6 months or so and see what some of these estimates, guesses are kind of coming to fruition, and seeing how things are progressing further. So, definitely think it's one of those. Let's revisit this further down the line and get you back on for sure. But look, from my side, thank you so much for joining today. I think it's been really great uncovering some of the things on a personal note for yourself, and equally in some of your insights for what made your career in organizations very successful, and kind of what you see as some of the insights for the future as well for the industry. So yeah, again, thank you so much for your time, and yeah, wishing you a great weekend, and thanks again, Pepe, and we'll catch up soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Ollie. Thanks again for the invitation, and it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. And yeah, like you say, I could talk about this stuff all day, but I'm sure we'll end up boring everyone. So maybe for another time. And if some of the predictions don't come true, let's use some smart technology to change my voice and make it look like I'd predicted it anyway. How's that for you?
That's a great idea. I like that. We'll keep that one in check. But no,
Real.
Thank you so much, mate. Have a great one. Cheers.
Take care.
Thanks a lot.